G'day, mate. Luke Ford here. I want to talk a little bit more about the former Los Angeles Dodger outfielder Yasiel Puig. He's now a member of the Cincinnati Reds. He's often been called the most interesting man in baseball. Read a little bit from this 2014 book, The Best Team Money Can Buy. Los Angeles Dodgers' wild struggle to build a baseball powerhouse. So talking about what happened when Yasiel Puig's minder, Tim Bravo, left. And when he left, he took with him any hope of keeping the riffraff away from Yasiel Puig. Oh, to be 22 and a Dodger, Vin Scully said of Puig, and he was right. Puig lapped up the Hollywood nightlife, becoming a constant presence on the club scene and chronicling his run-ins with other celebrities via his social media accounts. While his escapades were for the most part innocuous, his presence in these venues made it easier for grifters and snake oil salesmen to approach and befriend him. Soon he had an entourage of new buddies, including a guy whom Puig began referring to as his best friend, despite having known him only for days. Puig's new crew began showing up at Dodger Stadium hours before each game, every day, and stood on the field during batting practice as his guests. The ringleader seemed to know everyone, though nobody really knew how or what he did. Henley Ramirez knew him from Miami. When the Yankees came to town, Kano walked over and hugged him. Even Cristiano Ronaldo seemed familiar with him. Another member of Puig's entourage carried a binder with pictures of shoes and other swag, claimed to have access to, and approached Dodger players during batting practice. These men, these friends of Puig, roamed between the locker room and the field with guest passes from Puig hanging from their necks every day from around 4:30 until the time the game started. When they got kicked out of the clubhouse between the end of batting practice and game time, they'd go hang out in the dugout to the chagrin of stadium security, who had a hard time getting them to leave. If a guard tried to kick Puig's entourage out of the dugout minutes before, say, Kershaw arrived for his pregame ritual, one of the guys would simply call Puig, who would then leave the locker room and come to the dugout to hang with them. And then the guards could do nothing. Players tended to see the locker room as their sacred space. Most thought the media's pregame window was too long and were relieved when writers left. When the locker room was closed to everyone but players and staff, they were free to be themselves without worrying about saying or doing something that would be shared with the world. While Puig's friends weren't media, their presence in the locker room and dugout annoyed his teammates who did not appreciate the violation of personal space, because nobody in a position of authority wanted to say no to Yasiel Puig. It continued for the rest of the season. So Yasiel Puig has been nothing but trouble during his time with the Dodgers, and a pretty good report on Bleacher Report by Scott Miller, December 10, 2015. Is there anybody left in Los Angeles whom Yasiel Puig hasn't alienated? And here's the lead. While the Los Angeles Dodgers scramble to address life after Zach Greinke, their starting pitcher, who signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks, there remains the very real question of whether they can continue to live with Yasiel Puig. Major League Baseball is already conducting a parallel domestic abuse investigation into a bar fight involving Puig. The flamboyant Cuban outfielder now generates more controversy than homers, more antipathy than offense. Tucked somewhere among the salacious stories of Zach Greinke tossing Puig's suitcase off the bus and onto a street in Chicago, ace Clayton Kershaw allegedly advising the Dodgers front office this winter to dump the outfielder, and third baseman Justin Turner almost getting into a fight with Puig last spring, looms one of the biggest questions facing the Dodgers for 2016 is the relationship between Puig and his teammates inside the Dodgers clubhouse irreparably broken. Says one ex-Dodger, he is the worst person I've ever seen in this game. Puig is beyond redemption. So the 5 years that Puig was with the Dodgers was just filled with tardiness, rifts with roommates, all sorts of drama queen moments. Former Major League Baseball outfielder Andy Van Slyke, father of Dodgers outfielder Scott Van Slyke, told a St. Louis radio station that ace Clayton Kershaw had approached the Dodgers management and declared the first thing you need to do is get rid of Puig. Then TMZ reported Puig was involved in an altercation in a Miami bar. Started when he reportedly pushed his sister, got physical with employees at the bar who ran over to break it up, and then sucker punched a bouncer. So what was a regular habit of late arrivals peaked when Yasiel Puig was late to Dodger Stadium on opening day 2014 and was subsequently benched by then manager Don Mattingly. Puig showed up to spring training overweight in 2014, had his work ethic questioned in batting practice and in the weight room, has run into outs with maddening frequency on the bases, and has often come up coincidentally aching after striking out. So Don Mattingly memorably said during the Dodgers season opening series in Australia in 2014, with sarcasm as thick as pine tar about Yasiel Puig, shoulder yesterday, back today, so I'm not sure if they're going to get him tests or get him to the MRI or a bone scan. Not quite sure what we'll do. We may not do anything. I'm not sure. Puig has repeatedly torpedoed his own reputation through repeated petulant behavior. Across Major League Baseball, he is viewed as damaged goods with burdensome baggage. He is a completely different athlete, inferior athlete than he was 5 years ago. It's not even close. He doesn't have the bat speed or the pitch recognition. Everything he does is a notch or two down from where he was. All of the injuries, we've seen it. He doesn't have the same athleticism as he had before. Watching guys throwing 90 miles an hour throw the fastball right by him. When he first got here, guys were afraid to throw him fastballs for a strike. When Puig was hitting and playing as he did in 2013, his grading behavior was at least tolerable. When he isn't, it isn't. So it moves from the charming many school to get this guy out of here. Okay, the Greinke suitcase incident was first chronicled in author Molly Knight's book, published last summer, The Best Team Money Can Buy. So it occurred in mid-September 2014. Dodgers had scheduled their traditional rookie hazing, dressing the first-year players up in ridiculous-looking outfits and then making them go out and fetch pizza for the veterans. So the wait became longer than expected. Some veterans on the bus became angry, wanted the bus to move along. Puig was outside of the bus looking for his luggage in the holding bay underneath, and after Puig ignored several requests to close the bay door, Zach Greinke hopped off the bus, grabbed Puig's suitcase, and tossed it onto Michigan Avenue. Puig then went after Greinke and had to be restrained by veteran reliever J.P. Howell. So that's why Yasiel Puig is no longer a Dodger. So on a related note, I want to talk about an article by Charlie Rosen for FoxSports.com, published about 10 years ago. Darryl Dawkins has never worried about being politically correct. Ever since he made headlines in 1975 when he became the first schoolboy to be drafted into the NBA, Philadelphia 5th pick overall, Dawkins was never shy about speaking his mind. According to Dawkins, the upcoming Olympic basketball tournament, I think this is back in 2008, hinges on a subject no one else dares to fully address: the racial components that define basketball as we know it. The game is the same, says Dawkins. The object is for the good guys to score and to keep the bad guys from scoring. But there is a big difference between black basketball and white basketball. Growing up poor but happy near Orlando, Florida, Dawkins learned the former before he learned the latter. Black basketball is much more individualistic, he says, with so many other opportunities closed to young black kids. The basketball court in the playground or the schoolyard is one of the few places where they can assert themselves in a positive way. So if somebody makes you look bad with a shake and bake move, then you've got to come right back at him with something better, something more stylish. And if someone fouls you hard, you've got to foul him even harder. It's all about honor, pride, and establishing yourself as a man. Once the black game moves indoors and becomes more organized, the pressure to establish bona fides increases. Now you're talking about high school hoops, says Dawkins. So if you're not scoring buku points, if your picture isn't in the papers, if you don't have a trophy, then you ain't the man and you ain't nothing. Being second best is just as bad as being last. If a teammate hits 9 shots in a row, the black attitude is, screw him, now it's my turn to get it on. Young black players usually cherish untrammeled creativity. White hooplings mostly value more team-oriented concepts. White basketball means passing the hell out of the ball, says Dawkins. White guys are more willing to do something when somebody else has the ball, setting picks, boxing out, cutting, just to clear up space for a teammate, making the pass that leads to an assist. In white basketball, there's more of a sense of discipline, of running set plays and only taking wide open shots. If a guy gets hot, he'll get the ball until he cools off. So why is white basketball so structured and team-oriented? Because the white culture places more of a premium on winning, Dawkins believes, and less on self-indulgent preening and chest beating. That's because there are so many other situations in the white culture where a young kid can express himself. As the twig is bent, so grows the tree. When Dawkins and the Sixers squared off against the Portland Trailblazers for the NBA championship in 1977, Philadelphia's most dynamic players were Julius Erving, George McGinnis, World B. Free, and Dawkins. They beat us in 6 games, Dawkins recalls, and the series marked the most blatant example of the racial difference in NBA game plans. We were much more flamboyant than Portland and certainly more talented. We had more individual moves, more off-balance shots, more fancy passes, more dunks, and more entertaining stuff. But everybody wanted to shoot and be a star, including me. Nobody was willing to do the behind-the-scenes dirty work. Meanwhile, the white players at the core of Portland's eventual success were Dave Sardick, Bobby Gross, Larry Steele, and Bill Walton. Dawkins notes that even the black guys like Lionel Hollins, Mo Lucas, Johnny Davis, Lloyd Neal played disciplined, unselfish white basketball. Credit their coach, Jack Ramsey, for getting everybody on the same page. So, interesting black-white distinctions in basketball style there from Darryl Dawkins. The black game by itself, Dawkins says, is too chaotic and much too selfish. No one player is good enough to beat 5 opponents on a consistent basis. The black style also creates animosities among the players because everybody ends up arguing about who's shooting too much and who's not shooting enough. But the white game also has its drawbacks. It can get too predictable and even too cautious because guys can be afraid to take risks and make mistakes. The best NBA teams combine the best of both. In baseball and in civilian life, freedom without structure winds up being chaotic and destructive. Only when it operates within a system can freedom create something worthwhile. Okay, that's from Charlie Rosen, former CBA coach, author of 12 books about basketball, including A Pivotal Season, How the 1971-72 Lakers Changed the NBA. Let's listen to a little bit from John Mearsheimer talking about nuclear strategy.
Always look to gain military advantage over rival great powers, whether it's at the conventional level or at the nuclear level. At the nuclear level, great powers do not like living in a mad world. And when they find themselves in a mad world, they do everything they can to transcend it or to gain advantage despite it. My second argument is, although many arms controllers and nuclear revolutionists think that this kind of behavior is irrational, it is not. Indeed, it makes good strategic sense to arms race for advantage. And it certainly makes good strategic sense not to let your adversary gain a nuclear advantage over you. Third, while seeking nuclear advantage makes sense from the perspective of each individual great power, there's little doubt that it makes nuclear war more likely, which is not to say it makes it likely, but it clearly makes nuclear war more likely. The possibility of nuclear use would be close to zero if every country had nothing more than an assured destruction capability, which is, of course, the capability to destroy the other side as a functioning society. But that's not the world we live in, and it's not the world we will ever live in. How am I going to make my case? First, I want to explain to you why great powers seek nuclear advantage. And basically what I'm going to try and do is tell you what the good reasons are for trying to seek nuclear advantage. Then I'm going to attempt to explain what nuclear advantage looks like, because it's very important to give you some sense of how I think states can actually gain a nuclear advantage, which means they can use nuclear weapons in ways that benefit them and don't end up getting them incinerated.
Okay, that's a little bit from John Mearsheimer. I linked his complete lecture in the chat. Glib Bedley writes, Hillel Halkin wrote a few articles about how rap music is a return to medieval poetry, where the most esteemed tend to flaunt their greatness within their own verses. This is where sports have gone. Good point. And he also refers us to the sports talk personality, now Fallon Craig Carton. So there's an article about him in the New Yorker, The Rise and Fall of a New York Shock Jock. Craig Carton's misadventures in gambling and in the ticket resale game led the on-air personality to risk everything on a pretty flimsy play. So Craig Carton would host a show called Boomer and Carton on WFAN 660 AM in New York with Boomer Esiason. And 10 years earlier, the host in this slot had been Don Imus, whose success for nearly 2 decades had helped the station early on, just a sports geek fever dream, evolve into a deranged tri-state area Greek chorus. But one morning in April 2007, Imus, goaded by his sidekick Bernard McGurk, referred to the Rutgers University women's basketball team as an assemblage of nappy-headed hoes. This slur, unlike many earlier ones, brought on Imus's firing. That left a huge hole to fill. The station settled on Esiason and Carton. Esiason, then 46, had been a star quarterback in the NFL and a respected commentator. Carton, then 38, was a well-traveled, fast-talking shock jock, the knack for the rhythms and the provocations of free-form talk radio. As a straight man, Esiason made sense. He had a name, some gravitas, and a history with the station as a regular Imus guest. Carton was more of a gamble. At the time, Carton was the host of an FM talk show out of Trenton called The Jersey Guys, where he'd achieved some infamy after making fun of Governor Richard Cody's wife for her battles with postpartum depression. She had mentioned once having an urge to put her infant son in a microwave. The governor, Carton said on the air, could legalize medical marijuana so women can have a joint and relax instead of putting their babies in a microwave. Women who claim they suffer from this postpartum depression, they must be crazy in the first place. On a scheduled visit to the station, Cody, with a state trooper at his side, told Carton, I wish I weren't governor, I'd take you out. And the Telecommunications and Utilities Committee in the State Assembly gathered and passed a resolution to censure Carton. There are other stunts. Carton organized a 100 stripper rally in Trenton to protest a statewide ban on smoking in bars. In 2007, he urged listeners to turn in undocumented immigrants to the authorities. He called this Operation Rat a Rat. Stuff like this. Carton was named by the editors of prominent Trenton blog the 9th most powerful man in New Jersey politics. But he and Boomer Esiason clicked like the station's original Big Cheese duo, Mike Francesca and Chris Russo, Mike and the Mad Dog. They never had a falling out or even a cross day. Esiason, not the humblest of man, a type A my way or the highway guy, as Carton called him, had the sense to let his partner lead, to recognize that Carton had an almost Trumpian nose for the kind of bombast and volatility that caused people to linger in the parking lot or to tune in the next day. Some of that has to be manufactured, Esiason told me, or without writers. It's all improv. And Carton had a voice sounding like a male crack addict. In 2009, he had this exchange with female tennis player Jennifer Caprietti. Carton, not that you're not hot, but Joanna Krupa. How hot was she? Not bad, not bad. Would you ever get it on with a gal like that? What kind of questions are these, man? So now we live in a talk radio, sports world of Morning Joe, Fox and Friends, Mad Owl, Tapper, Blitzer, Cuomo, and Rush. But in a parallel, almost universally male universe, the day is refracted through sports. Rich, Dan, Mike, Dan, first take, around the horn. Pardon the interruption. Pardon my take. Highly questionable. Speak for yourself. And there are more than 100 basketball podcast. In the midst of all of this, Esiason and Carton, AM band throwbacks held their own. Within a year, they had the top-rated program, both at the station and in their demographic and their time slot in New York. They had achieved a brand of regional fame. Among the population of the tri-state area that reads the Post back to front or spends a fat part of the morning rush at the wheel. The pair harked back to a pre-internet age when the city had its own cast of colorful characters who have since been either eclipsed by or subsumed into the broader national tragedy farce of public life. In the era of Trump, many of our regional dramas and leading players have been elevated to the national stage. The city's indigenous scandals gasp for air. Okay, a little bit more here from John Mearsheimer.
To do is give you a synoptic version of Cold War and post-Cold War history to show that if you look at the great powers, two great powers in the Cold War and the single great power in the post-Cold War world, you'll see that they constantly worked to gain nuclear advantage. Then I want to deal with the two major counter-arguments against me, and then finally conclude with a few words about arms control and how far arms control can go to slow down an arms race. Okay, so let me give you my reasons why I think great powers seek nuclear advantage. And again, what I'm trying to do here is to tell you that it makes strategic sense. First, great powers sometimes have foreign policies that explicitly call for having a first-use strategy, which of course means initiating the use of nuclear weapons for either coercive or for purposes of defeating an adversary. And any country that has a first-use policy is going to want to have an advantage over its rivals. It kind of just goes with the territory.
Okay, Glib says in the chat that Carton was such an a-hole, but I often listened. Being able to discuss sports with pros is a fast way of building basic trust. It's like a passport for instant communication and trust building with other men. Glib says, knew a guy who shared roof deck access with another tenant, made the other guy's life miserable every time they're on the deck together, so that the other guy gave up the space. Cartons like that. Okay, thanks guys. I'm getting over a cold. Talk to you later. Bye.